getting back to it. All right, so the Massachusetts Bay Company. Let's check out what Scholastic gotta say. Scholastic, because we're talking about the first school. So let's deal with the scholastic scholasticism of it, if that's even a word. Scholasticism of it, the scholarism of it. Massachusetts Bay Company. This lesson plan is for grades 9 through 12. The Massachusetts Bay Company was a joint stock trading company chartered by the English Crown in 1629 to colonize a vast area in New England extending from 3 miles, 4.8 miles north of the Merrimack River to 3 miles south of the Charles River. It was quickly taken over by a group of Puritans under the leadership of John Winthrop, who wished to establish a religious community in the New World. The first colonists sailed from England in 1630. You get the charter in 1629. You set and sail in 1630 and established the Massachusetts Bay Colony with its center at Boston. They were soon joined by other settlers, almost all Puritans. By 1640, 20,000 of them had settled in Boston and neighboring towns, and the colony was a thriving success. The Puritan leaders had carried the company's charter with them to New England. This action enabled them to govern themselves and meant that they would not be controlled by governors and stockholders in England. Bending the charter to their own purposes, the Puritans transformed the company into a religious commonwealth. You hear that? They transformed the company into a religious commonwealth. Their ambition had been to establish an ideal Christian community, a quote, city on a hill, end quote, as Winthrop called it, with the eyes of England and the entire world on it. Winthrop was re-elected governor and a theocracy was in fact established. In May 1631, the Puritan leaders agreed to recognize only church members as freemen, those entitled to vote and hold office. All right? The company's officers became the colony's magistrates. The ministers of the church defined orthodoxy, and the colony's magistrates enforced it. Dissenters were suppressed or banished. Right? It's getting good. This is the Puritans, like, but they over here in Algonquin country. So let's see what the narrative says. Right? Early challenges to the charter were averted by the outbreak of the English Civil War in the 1640s. Right? For about 50 years, with little interference from England, the Massachusetts Bay Colony developed into a Puritan commonwealth. Right? So they had the English Civil War keeping the English off their backs while they was building over here. And then in 1684, however, the government of Charles II revoked the company's charter. The colony was merged briefly into the extensive but short lived, from 1686 to 1688, Dominion of New England, which included New Hampshire and New Jersey, and the colonies lying between them. With Plymouth and Maine, the colony became part of a unified royal colony of Massachusetts in 1691, right? The religious laws instituted by the Massachusetts Bay Company were largely repealed, right? What is a religious commonwealth? This is Commonwealth theology. Here we are in Virginia in the Commonwealth. So, what is Commonwealth theology? Commonwealth theology describes itself as a consolidation of mainstream Christian theologies like theoryologies, that better conforms the relationship between the Christian church and today's Israel to the relationship prophesied in the Old Testament and confirmed by the writings of the Apostolic Age Church. The Apostolic Age Church. Commonwealth theology derives its name from the Commonwealth of Israel, Ephesians 2:12, which describes a commonwealth inhabited by, quote, one new man, end quote. This corporate body with its citizens is understood to represent both a present reality achieved by Christ's atoning sacrifice and a yet to be realized future united community of believers known as the Commonwealth of Israel, who held the Jewish house Judah from the house of Joseph, i.e., Ephraim, aka Jezreel, Samaria, Israel. The 10 lost tribes, quote, swallowed up by the nations, Gentiles, Hosea 8, 7 through 9, bringing the, quote, rest of mankind, end quote, Acts 15, 17, with them to the united kingdom of David. How they play them words? United Kingdom of David. Excuse me. Similar to previous two house theologies, Commonwealth theology looks to the Ezekiel 37 prophecy of the two sticks, made one as the ultimate fulfillment upon which God will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their land. And I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be over them all. They shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again. Right? That's all dealing with religion, because that's what the Puritans who came over here was looking for, right? But the Mayflower and that whole thing. Let's see what the Britannica says. Let's see what the Britannica says. Let me magnify these letters up to about 150. Massachusetts Bay Company and Boston Settlement and Growth by English Puritans of the Massachusetts Bay Company, who, for religious and political reasons, put the Atlantic Ocean between themselves and the Church of England. Ostensibly founded as a commercial venture, the Massachusetts Bay Company, under its governor, John Winthrop, yeah, definitely gotta look that guy up. See what kind of oil paintings they got of this guy. Brought its charter, which it regarded as authorization to set up the Royal Charter, establishing the Massachusetts Bay Company to create a government in which freemen, quote unquote, which they have as white males who owned property and paid taxes, and thus could take on the responsibility of governing, elected a governor and a single legislative body called the Great and General Court, made up of assistants and deputies. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I should read more, right? Which regarded it as authorization to set up a self governing settlement in the New England wilderness along to the New World. The new town was named for Boston in Lincolnshire, the former home of many of the immigrants. Through necessity, many New Englanders turned to the sea for a livelihood and became shipbuilders, merchants, seamen, and fishermen. The Shawmut Peninsula, on the on which Boston was settled, was an ideal setting for a seaport. It was described in 1634 by William Wood in his New England's Prospect as, quote, fittest for such as can trade into England, for such commodities as the country wants, being the chief place for shipping and merchandise. With the triumph of the Puritan party in England in 1648, people moved freely between New England and the homeland, and close ties of family and trade linked Boston and London. By the end of the 17th century, Boston's fleet of seagoing vessels was exceeded only by those of London and Bristol in the English speaking world. Boston held its place as the largest town in British North America until the mid 18th century, when it fell behind the faster growing ports of Philadelphia and New York. All right. Political life and revolutionary activity. During its first 50 years, Boston was a homogeneous, self governing Puritan community that the leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Company ruled as they saw fit. Right? The three Puritan churches established on the congregational principle accounted for almost all the organized religion in Boston. Religious dissidents were banished, and some Quakers who persisted in returning were hanged for their pains. Right? This is them beefing about religion. The increasing prosperity of the colonial merchants brought Massachusetts Bay to London's special attention, and the company's charter was declared null and void in 1684. So, what, 62 years later? In 1686, with the arrival of Sir Edmund Andros as the first royal governor of the province of Massachusetts Bay, the authority of the crown was established in Boston itself. With this change, the Church of England first came to the town and the Puritan isolation ended. Boston never proved wholly docile. When word of the Glorious Revolution, 1688 to 89, reached them, the citizens on April 18, 1689, ejected Andros from office and imprisoned him. The memory of the autonomous first half century lingered. When London endeavored to enforce navigation laws and gain revenue from the Boston trade at the expense of the colonies, the aggrieved inhabitants resisted what they saw as unlawful authority. Right? Disaffection grew after passage of the Stamp Act by Parliament in 1765, and the governor's house was stormed and gutted, an act that destroyed many irreplaceable records of the colony's history. Right? So much for getting that story. The Boston Massacre of 1770, in which British troops fired on a crowd of civilian hecklers and killed several persons, and the Boston Tea Party of 1773, in which colonists disguised as American Indians, dumped 3 shiploads of tea into Boston Harbor, became renowned events marking the growth of unrest before the American Revolution, right? This is what they doing when they come here with that bullshit. But what I'm trying to see more accurately is, what were we doing? What were we doing? Let's go to archive.org. And what we want to look up, Boston. Oh, we want Massachussetts. 1600. How about that? Massachusetts 1600. What you got on that? 'Cause y'all didn't get your charter until 1620. You got journals from the House of Massachusetts. Take a look and see what they look like. The Emancipation of Massachusetts, the Dream and the Reality. (1715 to 1775). Oh, that is publications of the Colonial Society. Definitely you want to take a look into that. Addresses delivered before the Society of Colonial Wars in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 434 pages. Dun, dun. Flag of the Society of Colonial Wars. There's their colors. The expedition to Canada in 1690 under Sir William Ships by Walter K. Watkins. Let's put back in 1690. Having made some notes in the past on this early expedition of Massachusetts against the French, I was requested by my fellow members of the publication committee to present it to the Massachusetts Society in its yearbook for 1898, thinking it might assist members in obtaining data. I have consented and offer it not as a complete work, but as perhaps the most complete collection of material showing who participated in this celebrated though unsuccessful attempt of the colonists yet gathered. Owing to the non existence of the most of the company rolls, one is forced to have recourse to the list of grantees of the townships received as recompense by a portion of the participants or their heirs. Unfortunately, these lists are not all in existence, or there may be examples still in private hands and unknown to the writer. If the results obtained by their publication in supplying data equal those obtained from the publication in the 1897 yearbook of the accounts of the 1710 and 1711 expeditions, the compiler will feel repaid for his labor. An interesting presentation of the French accounts of the expedition is given in Sir William Phipps's Devant, Quebec, by Ernest Myron, published in Quebec in 1893. An attempt to present a list of those participating among the English troops is very faulty, from a lack of knowledge of the formation of the militia in Massachusetts and of the service also performed by them at Port Royal early in 1690, and also from the lack of knowledge that a detail of a portion of the Massachusetts troops was made against the Indians in New England in 1690. A detail of a portion of the Massachusetts troops was made against the Indians in New England in 1690. The names of the English soldiers are in many cases wrongly transcribed. Sir William Phipps's account of the expedition into Acadie and that upon Quebec and Canada. The present governors, together with the inhabitants of New England, out of a true sense of their gratitude, did think they could do no better or more manifestly express their loyalty to their majesties than by venturing their lives and estates toward the enlarging of their majesty's dominion in America, and particularly for the reducing of Canada unto their obedience. According to that resolution, they did raise about 700 men and fitted out 7 sail of ships at their own expense, and did give the command thereof to me. Oh yeah, that's gonna be a good read. Let me download that PDF. guess we're gonna have to go into the religious records to, you know what I mean, find out what the fuck was going on. But for the moment, I'm gonna put this on pause with the first school.